The imperial palace was a strange and unfathomable place, and there was no such thing as an impervious wall, no such thing as an eternal secret. The War of the Princes had always been extremely dangerous, which was why people regarded it with such apprehension. Wang Chong's relationship with 5th Prince Li Heng would have been exposed one day, but this was much faster than he had expected. It seems like there are already many spies around the 5th Prince. Wang Chong raised his eyes, a light flashing through them. A large tree would attract wind, and 5th Prince Li Heng was now different from what he was in the past. He was beginning to gather many advisors around him, but as he gathered more people, many others could mix their way in. This was unavoidable. These thoughts only briefly occupied Wang Chong's mind, and he quickly regained his composure. "Let's go." With a wave of his sleeve, Wang Chong returned to the sedan chair and seated himself back down. "Raise the chair." The silver-robed eunuch and the golden guards all exhaled. It was for the best that the talks between Wang Chong and the first prince had fallen through. After all, it could now be treated as if nothing had happened. Otherwise, the Great Tang's eldest prince would be colluding with the king of foreign lands favored by the sage emperor, which would bring calamity down on the rest of them. The sedan chair began to proceed forward once more. Around it, the vanished imperial army soldiers once more appeared, acting as if nothing had happened. Inside the sedan chair, however, Wang Chong had a heavy heart. Has the situation in the place gotten this serious? For Wang Chong, the appearance of the first prince had been a minor interlude. What he was really worried about was about what this situation implied. A prince privately meeting an important subject was forbidden, and the first prince would only dare to do such a thing if the situation in the palace was sufficiently chaotic. It all depends on the sage emperor. Wang Chong took in a deep breath and calmed back down. In this storm at the heart of the empire, the most important thing was always the sage emperor's stance. Moreover, after such a long time, Wang Chong dearly wanted to know just what the sage emperor's condition was. The sedan chair rapidly proceeded through the various layers of the palace, getting closer and closer to the political core of the empire. A few moments later, it stopped in front of a staircase consisting of thousands of steps carved from white jade. Wang Chong emerged from the sedan chair and was greeted by a vast multitude of golden guards, lining the white jade staircase from the bottom all the way to the top. And in front of that dazzling and golden hall, countless experts stood arrayed, their energies soaring into the sky in a dreadful display. Thump! At this moment, the crack of a whip came from high above. Reporting. Young Marquis Wang Chong has arrived for his audience. The firm and shrill voice echoed ceaselessly above the palace. Wang Chong tidied his robes and began to ascend the steps of white jade. This was not his first time climbing this stairway, but it gave him a different feeling from any time before. There were no spectating officials, no music or rituals. All this indicated that this audience was different from normal. Wang Chong quickly arrived in front of the great hall. "Young Marquis, enter. His Majesty is waiting for you within." The directing eunuch holding the whip softly said, his attitude toward Wang Chong one of respect. At this point, there was no one who did not know the reputation of Wang Chong, the new war god of the Great Tang. Even these eunuchs within the palace had heard of his thunderous reputation. "Many thanks, Sir Eunuch." Wang Chong bowed and passed the eunuch to enter the palace. Bzzz. Wang Chong stopped in front of the open doors into the palace, gazing into its dazzling interior with his mind in great turmoil. He had countless questions, countless grievances, but as he stood in front of this enormous palace, all these thoughts began to slowly fade away, and suddenly, Wang Chong became incredibly calm. At this moment, a mellow, genial, and rich voice came from within. "Wang Chong, enter." Wang Chong instantly recognized this as the voice of Gao Lishur. Wang Chong stepped over the threshold, and the moment he did, he seemed to enter an entirely different world. All other sound vanished, and familiar streams of energy washed over him like a vast sea of fog. This was not the first time Wang Chong had entered this hall to have an audience with the sage emperor. On his last audience, Wang Chong had felt like an insignificant ant before the sage emperor. But after half a year, Wang Chong had a completely different sensation. He was now on the verge of entering the subtle realm, and he could now even look upon this mysterious realm. He had even managed to kill Kateba. Great generals that were supreme existences to ordinary people weren't even worth thinking about in his eyes. Upon entering the hall this time, Wang Chong had not expected to still feel that deep awe and respect in his heart, like a child before a giant, meek and insignificant. If Wang Chong was a giant standing at the peak of a mountain, then the supreme and revered figure in the upper reaches of this hall was a god looking down upon the world from the heavens. The higher his cultivation level became, the more Wang Chong realized just how terrifyingly powerful the Sage Emperor was. Divine Martial Realm. This thought suddenly emerged in Wang Chong's mind. The subtle realm was already a mysterious existence, and Wang Chong knew just how powerful the energy of that realm was. But the Divine Martial Realm was even further above the subtle realm. The Sage Emperor from back then was an existence who was infinitesimally close to reaching the Divine Martial Realm, and Wang Chong had never imagined that the Sage Emperor had been this powerful back then. This lowly subject pays respects to the Sage Emperor. May the Sage Emperor live 10,000 years. Wang Chong quickly raised his robe, got down on his knees and lowered his head. The hall was absolutely silent as those majestic waves of energy continued to surge through the hall. After a long while, that dignified and divine voice finally spoke. "Rise." The entire hall seemed to tremble. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Wang Chong bowed his head again and stood up. Wang Chong stood around 70 meters away from the upper reaches of the hall, as the regulations of the imperial palace strictly forbade him from stepping any farther without explicit orders. Wang Chong stood there and shot a glance above. Unlike the outside, the palace was rather empty and not heavily guarded at all. There was only the supreme figure of the ruler of the world and the silk-robed eunuch Gao. There were not even any maids or guards inside this hall. Wang Chong couldn't help but find this strange. But Wang Chong quickly turned his gaze once more to the legendary sovereign of the Great Tang. Whether then or now, that person would always be the person that Wang Chong respected and admired the most. This was not because of his supreme status and power, but because he had led the empire from chaos into order, bringing it to unprecedented levels of power. This was the true Sage Emperor. Buzz. Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil. In the upper reaches of the hall, the Sage Emperor, dressed in his dragon robe and seated on the enormous dragon throne, lightly moved the index finger of his right hand, which was resting on a carved dragon armrest. Gao Lishir understood, opened the imperial decree, and stepped forward. "Wang Chong, hear the decree." Subject Wang Chong hears the decree. Wang Chong quickly lowered his head and bowed. "Acceding to the will of the heavens," the emperor declares. Young Marquis Wang Chong has protected the country. Young and full of potential in the battles of Talas and Karasan, he rendered great service and achieved incredible feats, raising the prestige of my Great Tang. Thus, with the Sage Emperor's approval, the 6 bureaus have agreed to confer upon young Marquis Wang Chong the title of the Great Tang's King of Foreign Lands. This rank enjoys the salary of a king and has the same status as a member of the imperial household. In addition, the Bureau of Rights and Bureau of Personnel have drafted documents to announce this matter to the world so that all subjects may learn by example. Thus is the emperor's decision. Gao Lishir put away the imperial decree and gave a gratified look to Wang Chong. He had watched as this child matured. During the regional commander's incident, when Wang Chong was censured by all the Hu and jailed within the imperial prison, Gao Lishir had come personally to see him and had even sent him medicine. From that moment, Gao Lishir had known that the Sage Emperor had high regard and favor for this youth. And Wang Chong had not let down the Sage Emperor's trust. In a little more than half a year, he had used a string of dazzling and astounding achievements to prove that the Sage Emperor was correct. "Wang Chong, come forward and receive the decree." The hall was quiet, and surprisingly, Wang Chong stood there and did not move. It was like someone had frozen him in place. If it had only been a moment, Gao Lishir might have believed that Wang Chong had not heard him clearly. But Wang Chong was standing there clearly without any intent to come up. "Young Marquis." Gao Lishir's face grimaced and his voice became somewhat louder. "Your Majesty, this subject would like to speak on a matter." Wang Chong bowed, his loud voice resounding through the hall. Wang Chong, you dare! Gao Lisher paled at this sight. The sage emperor had already announced Wang Chong's new title, and yet Wang Chong dared to refuse to receive the decree and even wanted to speak on a matter. He was clearly using this chance to arouse the sage emperor's doubts and suspicions. This was a major crime. Subject Wang Chong has a matter he wishes to speak on with His Majesty. To Gao Lisher's surprise, Wang Chong acted like he did not hear. He spoke once more, his voice even louder than before. This time, Gao Lisher's face was in a full grimace. It was obvious that Wang Chong was set on this course of action and no longer cared for the consequences. "Speak!" the sage emperor said in his dignified voice, indifferent and aloof. It was flat and emotionless. Apparently, he had long ago predicted this request from Wang Chong. Arabia is a country of tigers and wolves, an eternal calamity for the Great Tang. The size of this threat is greater than that of any of the other foreign countries bordering the Great Tang. Khorasan is of extreme importance in opposing Arabia. This subject implores your majesty to retract the decree. After saying this, Wang Chong got down on both knees and prostrated. More than a year of planning and more than half a year of campaigning, a massive investment of wealth, and the sacrifice of tens of thousands had finally resulted in the victory at Khorasan. No matter what, Wang Chong could not allow these sacrifices to be made in vain. Nor could he give the Arabs a chance to rise again and once more bring calamity down on the Central Plains. The Tang army had withdrawn, the coalition with the Khorasani had collapsed, and the entire military was being reduced. In this world, the only person who could change all this was the sage emperor. As long as the sage emperor gave the word, there was still a chance to salvage everything. Buzz! Wang Chong's words immediately set off a shockwave in the hall, and on the high platform, Gao Lisher made an extremely unsightly grimace. In the Great Tang, there was no divide greater than that between the militarists and the Confucians. The Confucians now had the complete advantage in the court, and Gao Lisher was worried that Wang Chong would bring up this matter in the audience. But there was nothing that could be done. "We understand." The sage emperor spoke once more, his voice emotionless. "Your Majesty, military is a matter of utmost importance to the state, a matter of life or death, extinction or survival. The military is the Great Tang's important defensive barrier against the foreigners on our borders. Reducing it is certain to bring down great disaster. Your Majesty, please consider this," Wang Chong implored. The hall was silent, and Gao Lisher finally couldn't help but retort, "Wang Chong, just what are you trying to do? The sovereign's orders are as immovable as a mountain and are to be taken seriously. Since His Majesty has already made his decision, it cannot be altered. Are you trying to make demands upon your superiors and extort the sage emperor?" Gao Lisher's face was ashen and suffused with rage. For the last several decades, no one in all the Great Tang had ever dared to speak to the sage emperor like this, much less pressure him as Wang Chong had. This was a treasonous line, enough to have him executed. This was criminal disrespect of the emperor. "Your Majesty, this lowly subject would not dare," Wang Chong loudly proclaimed, but his voice showed no signs of backing down. The person before him was no ordinary sovereign. His wisdom and intelligence had earned him the reverence of the people of the world, his ambitions and stratagems their admiration, and his administration and martial arts their praise. More importantly, he had single-handedly created the prosperous and thriving Great Tang Empire. The sage emperor back then had been capable of making Wang Chong's grandfather do his utmost and serve faithfully. Wang Chong was confident that the current sage emperor was still that wise and divine sovereign who embraced the world, a sovereign that was still worth following. "Wang Chong, hurry and rise." Gao Lisher was already trembling in rage, cursing the fact that he had just moments ago had such high regard for Wang Chong and thought him to be such a talented young man who had not let down the sage emperor's hopes. He had never imagined that so shortly after, Wang Chong would engage in such a foolish course of action. Did he not understand how difficult this would make his career? Enough! At this moment, the sage emperor spoke in an indifferent tone, slightly waving his hand to stop Gao Lisher. "Your Majesty." Gao Lishur immediately fell silent and lowered his head. The sage emperor gazed down at Wang Chong and lightly said, "Wang Chong, on this matter, we have our own plans." His voice was suffused with a tone that would brook no objection. "But, Your Majesty—" Wang Chong kept his head lowered, still wanting to argue, and Gao Lishur could watch no longer. Wang Chong! Such impudence! He had always had a good impression of Wang Chong, but no matter how many reasons Wang Chong had, how talented he was, or how much he had contributed to the empire, the sage emperor had already expressed his will. For Wang Chong to still try and butt heads was simply audacious and deserved the death penalty. King of foreign lands, receive the decree. At this moment, the sage emperor spoke in a vast, majestic, and determined voice. These words ended this conversation, breaking off all of Wang Chong's lines of thought. Wang Chong was left stunned, his face as white as a sheet of paper. Wang Chong had imagined this situation before, and he had imagined that as long as he tried every method possible, he would be able to change the sage emperor's mind. But it turned out that the sage emperor was far more determined than he had imagined, and his words had completely extinguished any hope Wang Chong had. Wang Chong's face was green and white, and he was unable to say anything for a long time. Suddenly, the crisp bong of a bell echoed through the hall. Wang Chong had never heard a sound like this before, sharp and precise, like the plucking of a zither. Although it sounded like a bell, it also seemed like it couldn't have come from a bell at all. More importantly, the imperial palace was a sacred ground, the home of the sage emperor. Wang Chong couldn't think of anyone who would dare to use this method to disturb an audience in this place. But what Wang Chong expected the least was the reaction of the sage emperor and Gao Lishur. When the bell sounded, Wang Chong clearly noticed Gao Lishur pale and even appear somewhat panicked. As for the sage emperor, his aura suddenly pulsed. At that moment, Wang Chong clearly sensed a hint of disorder in the sage emperor's energy. But this lasted only for a moment. The disorder quickly vanished as if suppressed by something. "Your Majesty!" Wang Chong's heart trembled and his face paled as he thought of something. "King of foreign lands, let us end things here for today," Gao Lishur suddenly said. "The sage emperor is rather tired. If there is a problem, bring it up next time." Although he was doing his utmost to remain calm, his voice subconsciously spoke in an urgent and anxious tone. The mood in the court became rather strange, completely different from what it was before. Wang Chong was dazed, countless thoughts rushing through his mind. He still wanted to say something more, but then the sage emperor waved his fingers, gesturing that he should leave. "King of foreign lands, go. This servant will send you off." Gao Lishur was already coming down the steps. Wang Chong mentally sighed. No matter how unwilling he was, he could only leave the hall. If he spoke any further, he would be committing a treasonous action, which would only hurt his cause, not help it. This lowly subject receives the decree. Wang Chong gave a deep bow. Once they had left the hall, Gao Lishur stopped and turned to Wang Chong. "King of foreign lands, this servant can understand your mood, but today is different from yesterday. You are now the Great Tang's king of foreign lands, the first king of the Great Tang of a different surname. Whether in the open or in the shadows, many people will be watching you. I hope that the king of foreign lands will be cautious with his words and actions and protect himself. As for his majesty, he has his reasons for this matter. King of foreign lands, you will understand in the future." He sighed as if he wanted to say more. Wang Chong wanted to ask more questions, but then Gao Lishur turned around and strode back into the hall. After a few moments of silence, Wang Chong recollected his thoughts and began to descend the steps of white jade. Not long after Wang Chong had left, Gao Lishur returned to the sage emperor's side. "Your Majesty, this matter has been a very bad blow to him. Is there really no need to tell him?" Gao Lishur hesitantly asked. "There's no need." The sage emperor waved his hand, his expression indifferent. "My body cannot hold on for very much longer. Even if this matter is corrected, it is certain to happen in the future. It is better to simply treat it as a trial for him and see just how far he can go. This old slave understands." Gao Lishur lowered his head and bowed. But, Your Majesty, your shift in attitude was so great. The officials, they find it very discomfiting. The sage emperor leaned against his throne, his eyes half shut as he calmly said, "A grave disease requires fierce medicine, and a world in chaos requires heavy-handed methods. We have already spent 20 years guarding against them. If we do not reveal some weakness and give them some opportunities, how could they ever be lured out?" The sage emperor spoke so that only the two of them could understand. The they that he spoke of caused Gao Lisher to sigh, a hint of worry in his eyes. This old slave understands. Cough, cough. At this moment, a sudden coughing could be heard, causing Gao Lisher to instantly pale. "Your Majesty!" Gao Lisher swiftly stepped forward to help the sage emperor, and a vigorous and steady pure yang energy surged out of Gao Lisher's body and into the sage emperor. The aura in the hall was in chaos, and only after a very long time did it finally calm down. Outside the imperial palace, Wang Chong was seated motionless in a carriage, his mind in upheaval. In this meeting with the sage emperor, not even at the final moment had Wang Chong received the answer he desired. The sage emperor's condition, that strange bell, and Gao Lisher's words before leaving, all of this was extremely abnormal. Wang Chong had originally believed that meeting the sage emperor would clear up some of the clouds of doubt and suspicion, but it had only caused them to thicken. "Wait a moment," Wang Chong suddenly said. "Don't return to the residence yet. Take me to the southern part of the city." The carriage immediately turned in that direction. On Azure Dragon Avenue in the southern part of the city was a massive estate, dignified and solemn, its gates flanked by 2 stone lions. Hanging over the gate was a black and golden placard declaring this place to be the Zhou residence. These 2 words were deeply embedded into the wood and written out in a bold and flamboyant style. This place was the residence of the violet azure bright minister, Zhou Wenqin. Wang Chong raised his head to look at this estate, his mind in turmoil. The Great Tang had 27 elder statesmen and 81 senior statesmen. Zhou Wenqin was one of the leaders of the elder statesmen and one of the most important civil officials in the faction of King Song and the Wang clan. When that incident happened, Zhou Wenqin had been one of the important officials to defect, and his defection had taken even King Song completely by surprise. When he was unable to get an answer from the sage emperor, Wang Chong had almost immediately thought about Zhou Wenqin. If he could understand why one of King Song's faithful supporters had suddenly flipped positions, he might be able to make sense of the entire matter. "Please send a message that King of Foreign Lands Wang Chong has come to pay a visit." At the gate of the Zhou residence, Wang Chong made a gesture, upon which Xianxia stepped forward and offered a calling card. The guard captain quickly received the card, glanced at it, and slightly paled. "Your Highness, please wait a moment. This one will deliver the message." The Zhou residence guard captain put away the calling card and swiftly headed into the residence. Wang Chong stood in front of the gates, his eyes slowly closing. The Zhou residence was calm at first, but in a moment, it fell into turmoil, and he could even faintly hear the cries of a woman. "Milord." Xianxia turned and looked worriedly at Wang Chong. As Old Eagle's disciple and the vital subordinate at Wang Chong's side in charge of intelligence, Xianxia knew the entire situation. After his sudden defection, Zhou Wenqin had retreated into his estate and refused all guests. He had also refused to go to morning court on the basis that he was ill. In truth, King Song and Wang Chong's big uncle Wang Zhen had come to find him in this period of time, but both of them had left empty-handed. "Relax. He will definitely come to meet us," Wang Chong said as if understanding Xianxia's worries. The turmoil in the Zhou residence was quickly pacified, and the entire estate fell quiet once more. Time slowly passed, and just when Xianxia believed that Wang Chong was mistaken, footsteps began to approach. Through the open gates of the Zhou residence, Xianxia immediately spotted a middle-aged scholar dressed in azure leisure clothes, leading out a group of servants and maids. He walked with his head slightly lowered, his eyes fixed to the ground. He appeared to be absent-minded and restless. When he was 30 to 40 steps from the main gate, a servant gave him a reminder, upon which the scholar came back to his senses. After tidying his clothes, he swiftly went up to greet Wang Chong, unaware that the king of foreign lands would be honoring me with his presence. This Zhou was rude in not coming out to greet your highness and begs your forgiveness. Zhou Wenqin clasped his hands together and bowed. Lord Zhou is too polite. Will you not invite us in to sit? Wang Chong nonchalantly said. Oh! Zhou Wenqin seemed to awaken from a dream, and he hurriedly stepped to the side. Your highness, please, please, please. It was only after saying please 3 times that Zhou Wenqin finally led Wang Chong into his estate. Once they entered the reception hall, the mood became extremely strange. The maids were pale and strange, and the guards at the door had extremely unnatural expressions. Even Zhou Wenqin seemed to be acting like he was seated on a pincushion. Is Lord Zhou still not prepared to say anything? Wang Chong took a tea cup off the table, took off the lid, and lightly played around with the foam on the tea. The attending maids immediately paled, and Zhou Wenqin's face immediately turned a sickly green. Ha! He suddenly gave a long sigh and stood up. He was like a prisoner sentenced to the death penalty who, after a night of torture, had finally decided to calmly accept his fate. Your Highness, Zhou Wenqin has nothing to say about this matter. Zhou Wenqin let down your Highness's trust. No matter how your Highness punishes me, this Zhou will calmly accept it and make no complaint. After saying this, he made a 90-degree bow. Wang Chong was the Great Tang's highest commander in Karasan and Qishi's temporary protector general. The defection of Zhou Wenqin and the others had led Wang Chong to be stripped of his military authority, removed from his position as temporary Qishi protector general, and had rendered his several months of fighting in Talas for naught. One could say that Wang Chong was the most direct victim of this incident. Zhou Wenqin could refuse to meet King Song and Wang Zhen, but he couldn't avoid Wang Chong forever. As a civil official, he had a duty to uphold the Confucian values, but in this incident, he had erred in morality and conduct. This was one of the reasons Wang Chong was so sure that Zhou Wenqin would meet him. Lord Zhou, what a noble and upstanding person you are. Xianxia coldly snorted at Zhou Wenqin, his voice brimming with hostility and hatred. At Qishi, it was precisely because of these people that Wang Chong got so angry that he vomited blood and fell unconscious. Xianxia still clearly remembered that sight, and he had never had any good impression of these people. Moreover, Zhou Wenqin was a defector, had gone back on his word, which was what Xianxia and the others hated the most. Enough! Wang Chong waved his hand and stopped Xianxia. Wang Chong put down the cup and calmly asked, Lord Zhou, is this your explanation? Your Highness, this Zhou also has his own sorrows. This Zhou has known King Song for many years, and whether it is King Song or Lord Wang Zhen, this one has always deeply admired them. Your Highness has fought on foreign battlefields to vanquish foes and raise the prestige of the country, and this Zhou is also full of praise for your Highness. Your Highness must believe this Zhou when he says that he would have never done such a thing if it were possible. Nonsense! You still did it, Xianxia angrily said. Is this your explanation? Do you know how many of our brothers sacrificed their lives and bled out on foreign lands just so you could say that you were forced into doing all this? In normal circumstances, he would have never been this agitated. But this situation was different. Half a year of effort had been wasted, and Xianxia could not accept Zhou Wenqin being so calm about it. Xianxia! Wang Chong shot a glance at Xianxia and silenced him. Then he turned back to Zhou Wenqin. So, Lord Zhou cannot say who commanded you or who made you change your mind? Your Highness, forgive me. It is not that this Zhou does not want to say, but he cannot say. Xianxia was further infuriated by these words and angrily glared. But Wang Chong seemed to understand, and he placed his hands on the armrest as he prepared to rise. Understood. Xianxia, let's go. With these words, Wang Chong paid no further attention to Zhou Wenqin and began to leave, leaving both Zhou Wenqin and Xianxia speechless. Today was the day in which Wang Chong had been granted his new title. Almost everyone in the capital knew of this. Zhou Wenqin had originally believed that Wang Chong had appeared at the Zhou residence to castigate him. He hadn't expected Wang Chong to leave after just saying a few words, and this left him utterly dumbfounded. Wait! As Wang Chong was about to step over the threshold, Zhou Wenqin finally couldn't help but call out, Lord Zhou has something else to say? Wang Chong stopped with his back to the reception hall. Your Highness, this matter was truly this Zhou's mistake, trusted as I was by King Song and Lord Wang. But the phoenix polishes the sparrow, and there is the origin. If your Highness and His Highness King Song have any complaints, please aim only at this Zhou alone. Let this Zhou's family go free. Relax. We haven't stooped to such a low level yet. With these words, Wang Chong stepped over the threshold and left. Behind him, Zhou Wenqin breathed a sigh of relief and respectfully bowed. Zhou Wenqin offers your Highness his utmost gratitude. Once they were out of the Zhou residence, Xianxia's heart was still somewhat angry and aggrieved. Milord, are we just letting him go? Everyone talks about the demeanor of a scholar, but this sort of person makes me want to retch in disgust. Let him go. Each person has their own difficulties. We can't completely disavow him just because he made a single mistake, Wang Chong calmly said, much less agitated than Xianxia was. But this bastard didn't tell us a thing. He caused Milord to be demoted and stripped of military authority, and even caused the efforts of our brothers to be for nothing. Letting him go like this is letting him off too easily. Didn't we come here in vain then? Xianxia indignantly said. Who said he said nothing? Wang Chong shot back. Ah! Xianxia was instantly struck dumb. He had been a witness to the entire meeting between Zhou Wenqin and Wang Chong. Zhou Wenqin had been nothing other than evasive, and had even pleaded that he had his own sorrows and troubles. He had mentioned nothing else, yet Wang Chong said that he had. But how? Xianxia thought back, but he couldn't bring to mind anything Zhou Wenqin had said that was useful. Xianxia, sometimes not saying anything is saying something. There are some things that don't need to be directly mentioned. Moreover, didn't he say something before we left? The phoenix polishes the sparrow, and there is the origin. After Wang Chong said this, he boarded the carriage, leaving Xianxia standing behind him in a daze. The phoenix polishes the sparrow, and there is the origin. What in the world does that mean? Xianxia muttered to himself, still not able to understand. Although he was in charge of intelligence, he was no match for Wang Chong when it came to literary allusions like this. There's no need to think about. Go. Let's return to the residence. Wang Chong's voice came from the carriage. Xianxia's heart trembled, and he immediately got onto the carriage and snapped the whip, setting the two horses on the road to the Wang family residence. As the wheels rolled forward, Wang Chong began to think. The phoenix polishes the sparrow referred to an incident from the Western Han. At the time, an incident of witchcraft had taken place in the palace, and the effects were so wide-ranging that the three departments had been assigned to perform a joint investigation. The investigating officials eventually traced the wooden and cloth puppets used in the witchcraft to a palace maid. Every form of torture was applied to the palace maid, but in the end, the only thing she said before dying was, "The phoenix polishes the sparrow, and I did not do this willingly. So is this the reason?" Wang Chong thought to himself. The phoenix polishes the sparrow meant that one was compelled, but there were only a few people in the imperial court that could compel someone like Zhou Wenqin. Suddenly, Wang Chong began to understand. It's about my turn to act now. No matter who you are, I'll definitely drag you out, Wang Chong quietly said to himself. Time slowly passed, and by the time Wang Chong returned to his residence, it was dark. An eagle flew over the walls and into the Wang family residence, and Xianxia was soon anxiously knocking at Wang Chong's door, a letter in his hand. He got down on one knee and sternly said, "Your Highness, it's bad. Master just sent word that Zhou Wenqin has already sent his resignation to the imperial court, stating that his ill health makes him unable to fulfill his duties to the imperial court, and he's requested to return to his hometown and retire. Moreover, the imperial court has already approved it. Master just sent men to investigate, and they discovered that the Zhou residence has already been emptied out." I understand. Wang Chong had been silently cultivating on his bed, and even now, his expression was unperturbed. Your Highness, now is the best time to get information on that day from Zhou Wenqin. Let's send some men to capture him. There's no need. Wang Chong waved his hand, not even bothering to open his eyes. This order left Xianxia flabbergasted. But, milord, Xianxia was frozen, completely unable to grasp Wang Chong's thinking. Don't worry about him. Let him go, Wang Chong softly said, his words ending the conversation. Xianxia was filled with confusion and unwillingness. But since Wang Chong had made up his mind, he could only withdraw. Once Xianxia was gone, Wang Chong finally opened his eyes, which exploded with dazzling light. But he quickly mastered his emotions, and the room returned to serenity. A night quickly passed. On the morning of the next day, after Wang Chong bathed himself, changed his clothes, and did his toiletries, the maids of the residence unhurriedly assisted him with putting on the red imperial robe signifying his identity as king of foreign lands. After adjusting the violet gold crown on his head, grasping the imperial sword granted to him in one hand while gripping the dragon token of the king of foreign lands in the other, he strode confidently out of the residence and into a gorgeous golden and red sedan chair, all as his mother and the servants watched on. Young master is so impressive. Young master is really handsome, with his red imperial robe and violet gold crown. Even Pan En and Song Yuan would feel inferior before young master. The charming maids blushed as they gazed at the 8-carrier sedan chair. When they had been helping Wang Chong put on the imperial robe, their hearts had been madly thumping. At some point, Wang Chong had matured from that hedonistic young scion into a hero of the entire Great Tang. The demeanor he had tempered through battle imbued his every movement with astonishing charm that could tempt any young maiden. Wang Chong's mother, Madame Zhao, stood at the gate, her eyes reddening and a grateful and excited look on her face. Today was Wang Chong's first session of morning court, and nothing could make Madame Zhao more excited. All her investment had finally paid off. Starting from this moment, the most good-for-nothing child of the Wang clan had also become an adult and could now stand in the court like the Wang clan's old master and display their talents. Raise the chair. Outside the Wang family's gate, with a loud call, 8 muscular guards stood up, raising the red and golden sedan chair and carrying it off toward the imperial palace. As Wang Chong set off, the sound of firecrackers going off could be heard behind him. Wang Chong sat in the sedan chair, in the center of 2 rows of guards, and was swiftly carried to the imperial city. After passing through many streets, he finally appeared before the palace gate. By the time Wang Chong arrived, there were already many sedan chairs in front of the palace gate. The Great Tang's morning court session began at the 5th watch, 5 a.m. to 7 a.m., and some of the more important officials would even get up at the 4th watch. Wang Chong could be considered to have arrived rather late. Many of the sedan chairs at the gate were empty. It was a law of the Great Tang that the sedan chairs for officials could at most send them up to the gates of the imperial city. But when Wang Chong arrived, he had noticed at a glance a sedan chair with the symbol of the Wang clan. His big uncle Wang Zhen had been waiting for him for some time. Once Wang Chong stepped forward, Wang Zhen began to walk with him to the imperial palace while assiduously explaining to him the taboos of the imperial court. Chong-er, this is your first time attending morning court as an advisor-in-waiting. Remember, in morning court it's more about watching, listening, and learning. Before speaking, you must be absolutely certain of your words and think about them again and again. In addition, all the officials and generals have their own grade which decides where they can stand, and you can't just choose a place. Although the imperial court has granted you the title of king of foreign lands, the position that you use to participate in politics is what determines your grade, which is your post of advisor-in-waiting. But you are still royalty of the court, a king of a different surname ennobled by his majesty, so other than the fact that the place where you stand is different, you have few other restrictions in the imperial court. The imperial court is different from the battlefield. There are many conventions and many restrictions, and things aren't decided just because one has a high enough status. In addition, a large tree attracts wind, and the imperial court is much more complicated than it was before. While you were on the border, many people had no means of doing anything to you, but when it comes to the imperial court, particularly when it comes to memorials sent from various areas and petitions urgently seeking resolution, if one cannot speak substantively, one will become the laughingstock of the court. Such incidents will become ways to attack you, and King Qi and others like him might even use these incidents to stir trouble and mar your reputation. Chong-er understands, Wang Chong respectfully said. Although Wang Chong had already become a much-admired great general and hero on the battlefield, the imperial court was an utterly strange and unfamiliar place where martial strength could not solve any problems. Back then, when great Tang war god Wang Zhongxi was at his most glorious period, he had been forced to leave Longxi's Big Dipper city and resign his posts to take up the position of Crown Prince's junior guardian in the palace precisely because he had fallen into a trap in the imperial court. A place where one could not see the smoke and fire of war was far more dangerous than a place where one could see such things. Wang Chong had long ago understood this point, but probably not even his big uncle knew that he did not share his big uncle's opinion. He had his own plans for this morning court session. In this early morning hour in the imperial palace, the Golden Guards had already opened the way. Golden Guards lined the palace avenues from the palace gate all the way to the site of the court session. Even someone unfamiliar with the imperial palace could simply follow these lines of Golden Guards all the way until they found the place where the court debates were held. As Wang Chong listened to Wang Zhen's lessons, he continued farther in. Along the way, all the Golden Guards who saw Wang Chong showed deep respect in their eyes. Whether it was the imperial army, the Golden Guards, or the protectorate armies on the border, anyone who was a great Tang soldier was brimming with respect and adoration for Wang Chong. But the civil officials Wang Chong met along the road were not so kind. Although they didn't dare to say anything too extreme about Wang Chong, given his status, a few critical comments here and there were unavoidable. Humph! Shielded by officials, 3 titles in 1 year, and becoming king of foreign lands at such a young age. Does the imperial court even have rules anymore? He's just an immature brat without even a proper beard. Putting him on the border is fine. After all, young men are full of spirit and rash courage. But what's this about allowing him to participate in political affairs? Or are old officials like us unable to compare to a single youth? SSSH. Softer. This person is the king of foreign lands, riding high on the waves of success. Try not to cause any trouble. A clan with 4 generals and ministers. What king of foreign lands? This is clearly an Azura king who's gone numb to the thought of killing people. Truly bone-chilling. Groups of people stood in the distance, softly whispering into each other's ears, but at Wang Chong's level of cultivation, no matter how softly they tried to speak, their words still rang out like peals of thunder in his ears. Chong-er, there's no need to worry about them. These are all old officials who have already spent decades in the imperial court. You've been promoted so quickly that it's hard for them not to grumble. Wang Zhen faintly smiled as he spoke. The officials of court came from a variety of backgrounds. Some of them had been promoted because of outstanding achievements, others had noble backgrounds, and others had been recommended for being filial and righteous, and some had performed well in the imperial examinations, and there was no distinction in these criticizers between those of King Song's faction and King Qi's faction. In truth, it was the same for me back when I entered the court, Wang Zhen added. Wang Chong couldn't help but smile at these words. The matter naturally wouldn't be as simple as his big uncle described it to be, but Wang Chong had already been through many great storms. He did not take these critical comments to heart. Big uncle, let's go. With a wave of his sleeve, Wang Chong walked inside with Wang Zhen. Foul brat. Remember that there are no relatives in the imperial court. Inside, just call me Lord Wang, Wang Zhen said, cracking a rare joke. Yes, Lord Wang. Wang Chong couldn't help but laugh. The Taiha Palace was serene and somber, and when Wang Chong walked in, many officials had already lined up according to their grade. Wang Chong, wearing his red imperial robe, confidently strode in, immediately becoming the center of attention. The officials who had been whispering to each other suddenly fell quiet, and countless of them began to take measure of the rising young star that was the king of foreign lands. Although Wang Chong had become famous in the War of the Southwest, quite a significant portion of the influential officials of the court had not even seen him before. To these people, only those who were able to squeeze their way into the dazzling Taiha Palace were worthy of being seen by them. Wang Chong's young figure elicited different emotions. There were admiring gazes, envious ones, appreciative ones, ones brimming with hostility and ones brimming with kindness. In the face of all these illustrious and influential politicians of the Central Plains, in the face of so many complicated gazes, Wang Chong was confident and unperturbed. His eyes swiftly swept over the gathered officials, and in a few short moments, he spotted a familiar figure. King Song. Beneath a cinnabar coiling dragon pillar, King Song was standing motionless in his imperial robe. King Song had been avoiding Wang Chong this entire time, even refusing Wang Chong's personal visits to his residence. But no matter how much he tried to evade, he could not run away from the morning court session. As if sensing Wang Chong's gaze, King Song turned his head and glanced. But after taking this glance, he immediately turned his head back around, avoiding Wang Chong's eyes. But this glance was enough for Wang Chong. At that moment, Wang Chong could sense that King Song's heart was filled with worries, and he seemed to be immersed in some immense cloud of confusion. It seems like the old butler wasn't lying, Wang Chong inwardly muttered. At times, one didn't need words to communicate. At the very least, Wang Chong had confirmed one thing. King Song was still King Song. He had not changed, though it seemed like he really had encountered a very difficult problem. Buzz. As Wang Chong quietly thought to himself, he suddenly heard a cold snort at his ear. At the same time, he sensed a malicious and hostile gaze turning on him. Wang Chong turned his head and saw another noble and powerful figure standing distantly opposite to King Song, their demeanor just as mighty and impressive. But this person had a sinister aura that could not be found on King Song. The officials surrounding this person were all coldly laughing at Wang Chong, none of them hiding the hostility in their eyes. King Chi. A thought flitted through Wang Chong's mind. This was not his first time seeing King Chi. He had already met him during the ceremony in which he was made a marquis, but this was the first time they were so close to each other in the same hall as colleagues. Wang Chong coldly laughed and then fearlessly and rudely glared at King Chi, showing no sign of backing down. King Chi's face instantly turned dark and gloomy, and with a cold snort, he turned his head away. Wang Chong was not bothered by King Chi. Wang Chong was currently at the height of his power, and was also the first king of the Great Tang with a different surname. Wang Chong's current status was on par with King Chi's, so he had no need to back down. The sage emperor had yet to arrive, so after shooting his glare at King Chi, Wang Chong began to look around the court. His big uncle had been correct. There truly were many new faces in the hall. In his dissolute days wandering the capital, although he had never attended a morning court session, he had learned all about the major officials of court, including their special symbols and how they spoke. And he had still been somewhat influenced by his upbringing in a clan of ministers and generals, and knew, even without entering the Taiha Palace, which people were in the imperial court. But there were many faces in the imperial court of which Wang Chong had no impression or knowledge. Moreover, the way these people stood, with their backs straight and their eyes forward, and even the way they moved, indicated that they all belonged to the same group. On the whole, they gave an extremely bizarre feeling. The majority of them were around 30 years old, which was very young in the imperial court. These people had their eyes shut and showed no willingness to acknowledge the others around them. In this situation, even if Wang Chong wanted to obtain any information from them, he would find it a very difficult task. His gaze paused on these people for a few moments before moving elsewhere. Suddenly, Wang Chong noticed something. Standing at the entrance to the hall, Wang Chong could clearly see that while King Song seemed rather worried and absent-minded, he was constantly looking in one direction. Wang Chong followed his gaze and saw a tall and slender figure who seemed prestigious and imposing. Their gaze focused on the upper reaches of the hall. This person did not seem particularly powerful, and at least in martial arts he was much weaker than people like Wang Chong or King Chi. But the power and influence he had built up over the years far exceeded that of any other official. Just by standing there, he was instantly a crane standing amongst the chickens. Moreover, even though he was just standing there with his hands behind his back, the surrounding officials, when they occasionally shot glances at him, would always have extremely respectful expressions. Wang Chong immediately recognized this man. Li Jianu, the Great Tang's prime minister, and in the eyes of many, a sage minister. Through his actions over the last 10-some years, he had won the respect of the civil and military officials of the court, but to Wang Chong, he was an out-and-out traitorous minister. At this moment, a voice pulled Wang Chong out of his thoughts. "Chonger, I'll leave first." My position is over there. Remember, for your first court session, talk less and watch more. Yes, Big Lord Wang. Wang Chong was just about to call out Big Uncle, but he quickly corrected himself. Wang Zhen quickly took his position, and Wang Chong also walked to the end of the imperial court ranks and stopped. Boom! As Wang Chong took his place, loud laughter resounded through the imperial court as countless people gazed upon Wang Chong with jeering eyes. A fine advisor in waiting. Wang Chong's initial entrance truly had left many of them quite scared. But in the end, he was just an advisor in waiting. In terms of grade, he was even behind some minor officials in the imperial court. Wang Chong only smiled. Standing at the back had its advantages, at least for what he wanted to do. As for those jeerers, Wang Chong immediately knew that these were King Qi's men. But this sort of mocking ridicule that neither hurt nor itched could not shake Wang Chong's mind. Not even cause a ripple. Thump! At this moment, a white-haired, silver-robed eunuch positioned on the raised platform suddenly raised his whip and cracked it. The entire imperial court fell quiet, and all the officials took up their proper positions. His Divine Majesty arrives. Ringing bells and musical instruments played, and before the sage emperor had even appeared, vast and majestic energy swept forward, engulfing the entire hall. A moment later, a golden figure appeared before the gathered officials. A divine god emerging from the side hall and ascending to the high platform to seat themselves on the dragon throne. When that figure sat down, the entire hall buzzed and trembled as if the entire world was shaking. Even Wang Chong couldn't help but feel an enormous pressure, and he solemnly lowered his head. May the emperor live 10,000 years. Amidst the sea of roars, all the officials lowered their heads and bowed, and a solemn and respectful atmosphere reigned through the hall. If there are any concerns, please present a memorial. If there are none, then withdraw. Eunuch Gao stood to the right of the sage emperor, his face red and genial like the Maitreya Buddha. Your Majesty, this subject has a memorial. Eunuch Gao had barely spoken when a civil official stepped forward, his ceremonial tablet held out. Just like that, today's court session had begun. Wang Chong stood in the very back of the court, silently observing everything. Whether in this life or the last, this was his first time taking part in a court session in which matters of state were discussed. Personally taking part was different from listening to gossip in the marketplace. The dynasties of the Central Plains had lasted for thousands of years, one generation after another, and the process in which officials discussed matters of state was now extremely refined. From as great as the budget for the military and financial allocation for the various areas to as small as miscarriages of justice and torrential rains and landslides. All these things were in the purview of the imperial court. The vastness of the Central Plains meant that the memorials and records accumulated each day ranged from the hundreds to thousands. This was why the Great Tang's morning court session began at the 5th watch. And some time ago, the sage emperor had relinquished a part of his authority and would only participate for extremely important proposals. The court session was halfway done when a discordant voice suddenly spoke. Last year, a flood took place in Ji County, and 6 or 7 out of 10 were drowned. Later, the men sent by the imperial court to handle the situation discovered that 9 out of 10 households in Ji County were impoverished, and more than 90% of common folk could not even guarantee 3 meals a day. Most families owned nothing more than a single table, a single bed, and 1 chest of clothes, and only 10 some coins in savings. This was a situation of extreme poverty, so the imperial court removed the local officials and dispatched 6 or 7 young officials skilled in administration and with past achievements to the county. But in the end, Ji County was unchanged and remained in dire poverty. Afterward, the imperial court made up its mind and ordered the Bureau of Revenue to allocate money to Ji County. However, not too long ago, the imperial court sent an imperial censor to investigate the situation. Not only was Ji County not prosperous, it is now even poorer than before. It has been said that advisor-in-waiting Lord Wang is extremely blessed with intelligence. Does he have any view on this? The mood in the imperial court instantly turned strange, and countless gazes focused on Wang Chong. Wang Chong had been quietly listening this entire time, but when he heard these words, He suddenly raised his head and looked to see who had spoken. What he saw was an official wearing azure robes standing at the front ranks, turning to him with a cold sneer. The other civil officials around him were also jeering at Wang Chong and appeared to be waiting to watch a good show. Investigating Minister Lin Chongxin. Wang Chong immediately recognized this person as one of King Qi's staunchest followers. Lin Chongxin had clearly asked Wang Chong this question on his first court session so that Wang Chong would make a fool of himself. On the other end, King Qi, his back to a cinnabar pillar, inwardly sneered. He rarely got involved in matters like this, but Lin Chongxin and the others had a greater understanding of these things. The matter of Ji County had been a constant headache for the Bureau of Personnel and Bureau of Revenue. No matter what they did, they couldn't resolve the problem. And after the imperial court intervened, the situation had actually gotten worse. Such a thing had never happened before. Truthfully speaking, this was an intractable problem with no solution. It had been brought up solely to make Wang Chong look bad. Although Wang Chong had an awesome reputation as king of foreign lands, matters of the imperial court were different from killing on the battlefield. One did not use sabers or swords to kill people in the imperial court. Foul brat, let me see how you answer. If you keep your mouth shut, I'll have people spread around that you're just a useless man who only knows how to kill, a boor, a monster. If you do answer and give a bad one, I'll have everyone jeer at you, and then I'll exaggerate the matter and say that you're ignorant and incompetent, with only your good looks to rely on, and that though you've rendered great service, you're still a good-for-nothing in your bones. If you say something a little useful and seem to have some sort of plan, I'll have everyone support you in implementing your plan. When Ji County's problems remain unresolved, I'll say that you're just an armchair strategist who can only speak nonsense and has greatly hindered the politics of the country, making you unsuitable to be an official of the court. In any case, no matter what you do, I have a way of sweeping away your reputation. King Qi said nothing, but his eyes were brimming with pride. He truly had hundreds of ways to deal with this immature and inexperienced brat. The imperial court was his territory, and Wang Chong didn't even have the power to decide how he died. Chong-er. Wang Zhen also turned back from his place on the front row to worriedly look at Wang Chong. King Qi's challenge had caught him off guard, but not even someone like Wang Zhen could do anything about it. After all, Wang Chong had been clearly named in front of all the other officials. The hall was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Even the sage emperor and eunuch Gao were watching Wang Chong. This was Wang Chong's first court session. If he did not quickly deal with this wave of problems and challenges, he would leave behind a disaster that would affect his future prospects. Moreover, once certain ambitious people began to embellish and exaggerate the matter, Wang Chong would be forced into an extremely passive position. After what seemed like seconds and like countless years, when the mood in the court was at its most oppressive and everyone believed that Wang Chong would shrink back from this challenge, everyone suddenly heard his young voice. Milords have already clearly stated the problem of Ji County. The periodic floods have caused the poverty in the county, and so if one wishes to address the poverty, one must address the floods. Wang Chong stood at the very last row and spoke slowly, but his words left everyone dazed. Ji County had been poverty-stricken for some time, and when the officials from the imperial court first arrived, they were only thinking about how to address the poverty, but they did not seek to find the cause. As Ji County grew more and more impoverished, after countless court debates, everyone finally realized that the reason for Ji County's poverty was the floods. This was Wang Chong's first court session, but he had been able to accurately reach the conclusion that the court had needed countless debates to reach. If any of them had been in Wang Chong's position, they would have never been able to accomplish this feat. This was a sign that Wang Chong was genuinely talented and could not be underestimated. This kid, he's rather formidable and has a little skill. Lin Chongxin glanced at the red-robed Wang Chong, his eyes narrowing and his heart turning cold. The primary purpose of this challenge was to make Wang Chong look a fool and let him understand that the internal politics of the imperial court were not as simple as the battles on the border. But Wang Chong's first words had hit the nail on the head, causing Lin Chongxin to feel threatened. As for why the 6 or 7 officials sent by the imperial court have failed to grasp the main point, causing the situation in Ji County to only get more and more serious, the reason is very simple. Rather than giving a man a fish, It is better to teach him to fish. Wang Chong turned to Lin Chongxin and said, Lord Lin, can I see the reports for Ji County? Lin Chongxin was immediately struck dumb. He naturally did not wish to give Wang Chong the reports, but in front of so many officials, he was forced to. Give the reports to Lord Wang. Lin Chongxin gave a gesture, and an official next to him quickly stepped forward to deliver a thick stack of reports to Wang Chong. When government affairs were being debated, the Bureau of Personnel and Bureau of Revenue were required to have reports ready so that they could be available for others to inspect. This was a routine practice. Wang Chong looked through the records, found the one for Ji County, and swiftly began to read through it. The entire court was silent, no one daring to disturb him. In the past, they might have chosen to jeer at this moment. After all, Wang Chong was just a general. But now, all of them had serious expressions and did not dare to regard Wang Chong as they did before. Clap. A few moments later, Wang Chong closed the report and passed it back to the official. It seems like my judgment was correct. From the county records of Ji County, one can see that the frequent floods have made the soil of Ji County extremely poor and unable to grow plants. Moreover, dealing with the floods will require the construction of large dikes, which will require a significant amount of time. More importantly, the floods have caused the people to become apprehensive and not dare farm their crops in that land. Thus, in this lowly subject's view, the plans for Ji County must be adjusted to fit its circumstances. The place is no longer suitable for farming and agriculture. Wang Chong lightly said to the assembled officials. Bang! His words immediately set off an uproar. Absurd! The people need food to live, and if they do not farm, what will they rely on to eat? King of foreign lands, you are speaking nonsense. Your Majesty. This subject censures advisor-in-waiting Wang Chong for speaking loosely on matters of state and misleading the people. Your Majesty, please punish him. I thought that he could offer some wise opinion, but it was something like this. How laughable! Wang Chong's words had poked a beehive, and the agitated officials immediately began to sound off with their criticisms. If not for the fact that Wang Chong had just been made king of foreign lands and had a rather unique status, any other advisor-in-waiting would have been completely covered in the spittle from the invectives of the officials and driven out of Taiha Palace. Heh, so he was just a demagogue, and I was wondering how he could be this formidable. King Qi coldly chuckled to himself. He had been worried for nothing. In the end, Wang Chong was still a good-for-nothing when it came to the internal affairs of the country and was only halfway competent. Chong-er, this is a disaster. Wang Chong's big uncle Wang Zhen felt his heart sink at this sight. Despite his many words of advice, Wang Chong had still fallen into a trap. The officials of the court would eat people alive. Wang Chong's words today would be enough for these people to use as a pretext to wipe away all the achievements Wang Chong had made through his 2 major battles on the border and make him the laughingstock of the world. Wang Chong had spent so much effort and risked his life to reach this point, but all of it would be gone in a single night. Wang Zhen was filled with self-criticism at this time. Ha! Wang Chong placed his hands behind his back and grinned at the reactions of the court officials. What will they rely on? Of course, they will rely on mining iron ore, copper ore, and silver ore. When the mood of the court was at its most furious, Wang Chong suddenly spoke, and his voice immediately suppressed all the impassioned criticisms. The hall instantly fell silent. King of foreign lands, what do you mean? In the end, it was still investigating Minister Lin Chongxin who voiced the question on everyone's mind. His expression was grave and there was a questioning look in his eyes. It's very simple. A loss in one corner can be regained in another. Although Ji County is no longer suitable for farming, I happen to know that this place is abundant with iron, copper, and silver ore, Wang Chong confidently said. What? Everyone was left flabbergasted by Wang Chong's words. Even King Qi was so shocked that he could not speak. Ji County actually had silver, copper, and iron ore. A most impoverished county was actually home to such precious mines? How could this be? This had to be nothing more than a fairy tale. The imperial court had dispatched at least 6 officials there, but none of them had heard anything about any ore veins. Wang Chong's words had left everyone dumbfounded. King of foreign lands, can we take your words as true? A civil official suddenly stepped out. The remonstrance minister Han Xiaoyun, his expression solemn. If Wang Chong's words were true, not only could the imperial court and the common households make money, an impoverished county would also be able to rise above the other counties. Of course, one of my subordinates happened to be passing through the area, which is why I know of this. As for whether it's true or not, the imperial court can dispatch a fast rider and find out whether it's true in just a few days. All the officials had doubtful looks on their faces. Ji County was not a very important place, but if Wang Chong somehow knew of iron, copper, and silver or veins that the inhabitants themselves didn't know about, then one could only say that Wang Chong's subordinate possessed all the good luck in the world. Wang Chong raised his head high, his expression confident and assured. He only grinned at these questioning gazes, giving no explanation. When he was looking through the Ji County records, he had specifically looked at the map. He then thought back and realized that Ji County possessed large quantities of iron, copper, and silver ore. These ore veins were deeper in the ground than usual, so the generations of commoners had failed to discover them and were still in their impoverished state. But Wang Chong was different. By using his memories, he knew to buy wood steel from the Hyderabad mines, knew to send his cousin Wang Liang to the overseas islands to bring back meteoric metal ore. He was naturally capable of discovering ore veins in Ji County. Moreover, in the future, during the Great Calamity, the earth would sunder apart, exposing all the ore veins hidden deep underground. Iron ore veins can be developed into mines, and the ores can be used for smelting and forging weapons. Many peasants can be recruited for this so that they have work. As for copper and silver ore veins, they can be used to cast coins and fill the treasury. At the same time, some of these coins can be allocated to Ji County for the purpose of controlling the floods. The floods of Ji County will take a long time to bring under control. This was also one of the reasons the officials sent to Ji County before all failed. The common people need to eat, and they cannot wait for that long. But what if the imperial court allocates money? If all the people are mobilized for 2 or 3 years to focus on building dikes and dams, the floods can be controlled while the soil will have time to recover. Once the dikes are finished and the floods completely brought under control, the people can once more begin farming. Honing the edge of an axe won't delay the task of cutting firewood. Wang Chong softly smiled. Wang Chong's words left all the officials and generals in the hall amazed and astounded. Meanwhile, King Qi's complexion was so dark that it seemed like the bottom of a pot. He had certainly not commanded Lin Chongxin to deal with Wang Chong just so that Wang Chong could burnish his reputation. His original plan was that no matter how smart Wang Chong was, he could think of some way to ruin it and make the plans fail. But if there really was iron, copper, and even silver in Ji County, and if Wang Chong's plans really were implemented, if they didn't succeed, even a fool could tell that someone had intentionally ruined them. Because these factors alone were enough to make Wang Chong's position impregnable. He had already completely lost this round. This bastard! King Qi clenched his fists and ground his teeth. Although he hoped that Wang Chong was lying, it was clear that someone of Wang Chong's current status would not use this sort of thing to play a joke. The risk of being exposed was too great. And from the reactions of the officials, Lin Chongxin's attempt to make trouble for Wang Chong had only made things worse. Not only had he failed to attack Wang Chong's reputation, he had actually widened Wang Chong's influence. Another civil official stepped forward. Lord Wang, where are the ore veins that you speak of? We can immediately dispatch men to begin prospective excavation. Without delay, Wang Chong immediately listed out 3 areas. Areas in which ore veins were hidden deep underground would have special features. The presence of silver, copper, and iron ore under these areas would cause the topography to be different, making them easy to recognize. Did you hear it? Note these areas down and immediately send them to the Ji County officials. Dig strictly according to the areas noted on the map, the official said. Yes, my lord. A minor official in charge of sending messages standing at the edge of the court immediately strode out of the hall. Meanwhile, Wang Zhen exchanged a few glances with Wang Chong and breathed a sigh of relief. Chonger, good job. Wang Zhen communicated his praise through his eyes. In the situation just now, Even Wang Zhen had believed that Wang Chong had been led into a trap. On the contrary, however, Wang Chong had put on a dazzling performance in his first court session, winning the admiration of the gathered officials. There existed a massive chasm between the martial path and the civil path, particularly when it came to discussion of political affairs. Thus, the majority of generals chose to remain silent, only occasionally speaking when the affair involved the military. But in this aspect, Wang Chong was clearly able to smoothly switch between both sides. High on the platform, the sage emperor was like a motionless mountain, and it was impossible to tell if he was sad or happy. But at his side, Gao Lisher gave a subtle nod. Although Wang Chong still had the tendency of youth to decide things with emotion, Wang Chong was truly a formidable person, whether it was with regards to internal affairs or military affairs. The discussion of Ji County was quickly brought to a close, and the hostility aimed at Wang Chong was clearly greatly reduced. When some officials occasionally brought up Wang Chong, they would speak with respect. The situation was completely different from what it was at the start. As time passed, there were fewer and fewer matters that required debate. In this aspect, the Great Tang remained highly efficient. It was precisely this sort of efficiency that had caused the sage emperor to remove himself from most political matters and allow the court to handle them. Wang Chong silently observed everything, slowly developing an understanding of the various mysterious procedures of court politics. It was soon late in the morning and about time to dismiss the court for the day. "Your Majesty, this subject has a memorial." At this moment, an official that Wang Chong had no impression of suddenly stepped forward, holding aloft his ceremonial tablet as he bowed. Gao Lisher glanced at the sage emperor before suddenly saying, "His Majesty permits you to speak. Your Majesty, the Great Tang is currently at peace, and all the foreign countries on its borders have been awed into putting down their weapons and ceasing hostilities. Moreover, the imperial court has already signed treaties with the various countries to engage in mutual trading relations. In order to reduce the taxes and corvée labor on the common people, this subject proposes dissolving the prefectural armies. After giving the soldiers some compensation, have them return home to take up farming or other enterprises." Boom! The words of this official caused the imperial court to immediately explode. All the generals furiously stared at this official, and even Wang Chong instantly paled. "Your Majesty, this subject objects." Absurd! The prefectural army system was established by Emperors Gaozu and Taizong, and to touch it would be to harm the country as a whole. "This subject objects. Dissolving the prefectural armies can be done over my dead body. You civil officials just want to target us generals. You've already transferred back the young marquis and have reduced the various protectorate armies. What else do you want? Since you've already put forward such a sound and logical argument, why don't we just dismiss all the soldiers and generals? If something happens, you civil officials can go and fight the war." It was like someone had poked a beehive in the hall as all the generals exploded in rage. Even the Minister of War Zhangqiu Jianxiong could not hide the flames of anger in his eyes. Another civil official quickly stepped forward and harshly rebuked, "Bastards! So you generals wish to threaten the imperial court." A third strange official stepped out of the ranks. "Civil officials govern the country while generals guard the borders. These are our duties. If we follow your line of thinking, then we should have you generals govern the country. Ever since the Great Tang was founded, it has been embroiled in wars. The power of the country is spent, its people burdened and its resources squandered. Now is the perfect time to dissolve the prefectural armies and improve the lives of the people." More and more civil officials began to enter the fray, barraging that general who had issued threats with criticism. Although civil officials could not fight on the battlefield and were no match for the generals, the imperial court was not the battlefield, and martial strength had no use here. All the generals, no matter how high their cultivation levels were, could not find any advantage in these arguments. "Your Majesty, this subject has a memorial." This subject censures General Zhang for engaging in alarmist talk and deluding the people with lies, thus harming the country. This subject charges him with failing his duty. On the other end, King Qi shot a glance at the civil officials of his faction, indicating that they should join the attack against the generals. In the imperial court, if King Song was a staunch hawk, King Qi was a staunch dove. On this point, he just so happened to share the same goal as these civil officials. Wang Chong stood at the very back, and as the civil officials advanced against the generals, his eyes slowly narrowed and chilled. The army had already been withdrawn from Khorasan, and the various protectorate armies had also been reduced. The inspectors from the Confucian school had also been planted in every level of the military. The military had been pushed back again and again, but Wang Chong had never expected that they would be so irrational as to also set their eyes on the prefectural armies. If the protectorate armies were reduced, then once a war began, one could still transfer elites from the prefectural armies to swiftly restore the protectorate armies to their full power. But if even the prefectural armies were dissolved, this would be cutting off the Great Tang's foundation. The quarrel between civil officials and generals was intensifying, and just when all the generals were under a barrage of criticism from the civil officials, a loud voice rang out. "Your Majesty, this subject objects." This voice immediately plunged the hall into silence. All the arguing faded away, and the generals looked to Wang Chong in excitement, their spirits rallying. The king of foreign lands. Wang Chong possessed supreme status in the military. Although he had only risen up a short time ago, his influence was so great that not even two border protector generals or great generals could compare. The weight of Wang Chong's words alone surpassed the combined weight of all the generals present in the hall. Moreover, Wang Chong had an illustrious background, as his grandfather Wang Jiling had been a sage minister who was even now revered by the people of the Great Tang. No general could compare to Wang Chong in this aspect. "Lord Wang, what's the meaning of this?" The strange official who had made the proposal in the first place turned to Wang Chong, and the other officials also began to turn their eyes to him. The entire hall was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop, and the air was fraught with tension. Wang Chong ignored the official and spoke straight to the sage emperor. "Your Majesty, this subject believes that the proposal to dissolve the prefectural armies is utterly unnecessary and can be ruled out straight away." "Wang Chong, you're being impudent. The various protectorates are engaged in war every year, placing an enormous burden on the people. Do you still wish for this situation to continue?" Another civil official walked out, utterly infuriated by Wang Chong's stance. "So, your meaning is that when the soldiers on the border are risking their lives to protect the country, they are living extravagant lives and preying on the people?" Wang Chong shot an indifferent glance at this official, his eyes like cold beads of ice. This official was instantly rendered speechless. No matter how bold he was or how dissatisfied he was with the military, not even he would dare to say such things. "Your Majesty, this subject censures these civil officials who delude the people with lies and harm the country. Your Majesty, this subject requests that they be expelled from their positions and harshly punished." Wang Chong coldly said. The imperial court's first impression of Wang Chong had been that of a warm and composed individual, but the proposal to dissolve the prefectural armies had thoroughly enraged him. This was Wang Chong's first censuring of a civil official after being made a king, and he was censuring 10-some people at once. The aggressive posturing of the civil officials was immediately dealt a severe blow. Although Wang Chong was taking part in the court as an advisor-in-waiting, he was still the king of foreign lands, personally granted this title by the sage emperor. Not even Wang Chong's big uncle Wang Zhen could compare to him in status, much less the others. An elderly voice suddenly spoke. "Wang Chong, such impudence! This old man knows that you were just granted a new title and are flushed with success and the energy of youth. But this is only your first court session. For you to use your identity to bully other important officials is truly audacious." Censuring and remonstrations were first approved by Emperors Gaozu and Taizong, and all governments and sovereigns since have adopted their policies on this matter. To silence criticism is tantamount to deceiving the emperor and bringing disaster on the Great Tang. "Your Majesty, this old subject censures King of foreign lands Wang Chong for presumptuously silencing criticisms. Your Majesty, please strip him of his noble title and demote him to a commoner, never again to enter the rolls." In a seat near the white jade steps, close to the sage emperor's throne, the aged Grand Preceptor, who had been seated motionless in his armchair this entire time, his eyes closed, suddenly stood up and gave Wang Chong a chilling glare. The Grand Preceptor, Zhan Zhongmi, the leader of the Great Tang's civil officials. The moment the Grand Preceptor spoke, a cold wind blew through the hall, and the weather went from that of early spring to frigid winter. The entire imperial court fell silent, and even the generals did not dare to speak. Even King Song slightly grimaced. The Grand Preceptor wielded enormous influence and had a prestigious status. If Wang Chong could not handle this well, this incident would affect his future career prospects. While King Song was worried about Wang Chong's future career, Wang Chong was thinking about something else entirely. Humph! Wang Chong coldly snorted, not even backing down before the prestigious and virtuous Grand Preceptor of the Great Tang. The prefectural army policy was the foundation of the country. The Confucian school's bullying had gone too far if it thought it could tamper with the foundation of the militarists. Let alone the Grand Preceptor, even if someone with 10 times his status came along, Wang Chong would still not back down. This was no longer a simple quarrel between civil and military, Confucians and militarists. This was shaking the very foundation of the empire. If even Wang Chong backed down, the destruction of the Great Tang would not be far off. Wang Chong took several steps forward. Venerable Grand Preceptor, you are an elder of 2 governments, and Wang Chong has always regarded you with utmost respect. I did not think that your heart would be so selfish. For the sake of private gain, you would destroy the public good. This has truly disappointed me and left me ashamed. His words immediately had the hall exploding into a stunned uproar. Chong-er! Wang Zhen shouted in surprise, his face paling. The Grand Preceptor's status was no trifling matter, and his influence was simply too great. This was not someone that one could directly butt heads with, but in the end Wang Chong was still too young. Impudent! Even if Wang Bo were here, he would not dare to act like this. Was this how he taught you? The Grand Preceptor was enraged, and the entire hall buzzed and shook in response. Grand Preceptor Zhan was already more than 80 years old and had once been schoolmates with Wang Chong's grandfather, Wang Jiling, also known as Wang Bo, studying under the same teacher. But even so, the Grand Preceptor had always had a fiery temper. Wang Chong was merely a grandson of Wang Jiling, yet he dared to butt heads with him. This was absolutely ridiculous. The entire imperial court quailed in the face of the Grand Preceptor's rage. Solely by butting heads with the Grand Preceptor, Wang Chong would probably be criticized by all of society tomorrow. Everyone had originally believed that Wang Chong would act a little more restrained, but all of them had underestimated his rage. Ever since he had returned from Karasan, Wang Chong's mind had been suppressing a wicked flame. The Confucian school was completely disregarding the health of the country to suppress the militarists, completely enraging him. And there was one thing that everyone was wrong on. Wang Chong had never been a person who pursued noble titles. Wang Chong was only doing his utmost so that he could put the Great Tang in the best possible situation before the descent of the calamity. Now that all his efforts had been made for naught, let alone the rank of king, if he had gotten an even higher noble title, what was the point? When the calamity arrived, the Central Plains would collapse and crumble. There would be no difference between king or commoner, so what was the point? Wang Chong looked up at the Grand Preceptor and harshly said, "My grandfather taught me that the world was the people's, and that I should place the people and country at the forefront and protect the country, not that I should allow private feelings to outweigh the public good and bully around others with my age. Being an elder yet knowing no respect." Boom! The entire hall quaked at Wang Chong's words, striking everyone dumb. Ever since Grand Preceptor Zhan had taken up his prestigious position, no one had ever dared to talk back to him and say such words. And no one had ever been like Wang Chong, criticizing the Grand Preceptor in front of the imperial court for placing private wants over the public good and showing a lack of respect. Even Gao Lishur next to the dragon throne was stunned. Meanwhile, Wang Chong's big uncle Wang Zhen felt his heart sink like a stone. If this continued, the Wang clan would probably form a grudge with the Grand Preceptor. Foul brat! You're quite bold. Grand Preceptor Zhan was shaking in rage from Wang Chong's words, his beard quivering and his lips twitching. He had spent an entire life highly respected and admired, and he had never tasted such humiliation before. Someone of the Grand Preceptor's personality could not endure this. But because he had never encountered such a situation before, even though he was trembling in rage, he couldn't find a proper rebuke. A moment later, his face had gone purple with anger. "Humph, Grand Preceptor. I am the great Tang's king of foreign lands, enjoying the same rank and status as you. And I am only a foul brat in your eyes? In this imperial court, there is only a sovereign and his subjects, so where did this foul brat come from? I say that you allow personal feelings to outweigh the public good. What's your defense?" Wang Chong coldly snorted, and not only did he not retreat, he took 2 threatening steps forward. Perhaps because Wang Chong had always been rather mild, never retorting when others made comments about him, he had given the impression of a junior who was easy to talk with and bully, and didn't have much of a temper. But at this moment, when Wang Chong was enraged, his eyes were like dazzling and intimidating lightning bolts. As an imperial great general, Wang Chong had commanded millions of soldiers on the battlefield, and the demeanor of fire and iron that he had tempered through his experiences was not something that anyone could compare to. Not only that, not even Wang Chong had realized that in his rage, he had begun to naturally exude the immense aura of the war saint of the Central Plains, intimidating all those around him. The court officials, cowed by Wang Chong's gaze, began to unconsciously take a few steps back. "King of foreign lands?" Gao Lishur almost imperceptibly creased his brow at this sight. By butting heads with the Grand Preceptor, Wang Chong was offending all the civil officials, which would not be good for Wang Chong in the future. The censures from the civil officials would be enough to drown him to death. Gao Lishur subconsciously shot a glance at the Sage Emperor. The Sage Emperor had his eyes half closed, his face emotionless. He clearly had no intention of stopping any of this. The Grand Preceptor was currently so infuriated that he couldn't speak. He only thrust out a hand and pointed at Wang Chong, his finger trembling. But though the Grand Preceptor was enraged, Wang Chong was even more infuriated. The country above all, the people as the utmost priority. The military fights for the good of the common people. Do all of you know what will happen without the prefectural army system? Wang Chong swept his eyes over the officials, streaks of blood in his eyes. These were all Confucian pedants. They all thought that they were working for the good of the people, but it was precisely these Confucian officials who were shaking the foundation of the empire. On this western expedition, he had expended so much effort to advance all the way to Khurasan and establish the coalition army, but only a few moments later, the Confucians of the imperial court had ruined it all. This cutting off of one's own hands and feet was simply unheard of. In the spring and autumn period, the states were all campaigning against each other. During the Battle of Chongping, the state of Zhao lost more than 400,000 men in its war with Qin. With no more soldiers to use, Zhao was destroyed. Later on, the Great Qin was established. In the 7th year of Emperor Huhai, rebel warlords rose up in various areas. After several campaigns, Qin's armies had been greatly reduced, but because it did not have sufficient reserves and soldiers recruited impromptu were of little use, this vast empire soon crumbled. In the 37th year of the Western Han, Gaozu of Han engaged in an expedition to the north, but his army of 200,000 was surrounded at Baideng. The army was in straitened circumstances, and in the end, it was only through the temptation of beautiful women that they were finally able to escape from the Xiongnu. In the 14th year of the Day era of the former Sui, the Great Sui battled with the Turks and was defeated in a single battle. As the Turks advanced, no soldiers could be found in all of the Great Sui, and there was no time to recruit more soldiers. Thus, the Great Sui was forced to make peace by offering a princess, creating an enormous disgrace that was only washed away when a force of elites was built up and the Turkic Khaganate was divided into the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates. In generation after generation, dynasty after dynasty, when maintaining an army, if the army is ever victorious, one cannot see any problems, but once it is defeated and there are no reserves to draw on, the country's foundation will immediately be shaken and it will face a lethal crisis. Without the prefectural army system, a few small kingdoms had their capitals invaded by foreign barbarians, their countries vanquished and the foreigners establishing dynasties on their former lands. It is precisely because Emperors Gaozu and Taizong absorbed these lessons from previous dynasties that they established the prefectural army system. Emperor Taizong even personally went hunting, teaching the noble scions of the capital and instilling in them a sense of martial pride, thus leading to the powerful and flourishing armies of today's Great Tang. Afterward, when the Great Tang campaigned on its borders, it had a constant stream of reserve soldiers. This was the reason it was able to rely on 600,000 some elites to constantly suppress the Eastern and Western Turks, the Goguryeo Empire, the Shi, the Khitans, Yusang, and Mengshi and advance into the western regions. Only this dynasty could possibly have accomplished such feats with only an army of 600,000. In the 11th year of the Tianxian era in the reign of Gaozong, Yusang attacked together with the Eastern and Western Turks. If the losses in the army had not been promptly filled in by the prefectural armies, the empire would already be in ruins. Wang Chong's voice was deafening, stunning every person in the hall. His eyes were bloodshot, seething with rage. If Wang Chong were merely venting his rage, no one in the hall would have paid him any attention. After all, this was the Taihe Palace, where not even someone with the greatest achievements and highest of status could mess around. But even though Wang Chong was enraged, his every word was reasonable, and all the examples he stated could be found in the annals of history. At some point, even the grand scribe Yan Wenzhang, who had been sitting on the side and swiftly recording events with his brush, had stood up from his seat and begun to listen attentively to Wang Chong. Even he had to admit that Wang Chong's arguments were reasonable. To actually have so little thought of future dangers and dissolve the prefectural armies is unquestionably shaking the foundation of the country. Grand Preceptor, in my view, you have been blinded by greed and gone senile, that you could even support a proposal like this. Grand Preceptor, I advise you to retire. Rumble. Wang Chong's words clanged against the floor, and his final word was like a crack of thunder, leaving the Grand Preceptor staggering backward, his feet unsteady. King of foreign lands, you dare. You infuriate me. The Grand Preceptor was ghastly pale. Wang Chong's utterance of retire had thrown his entire body into chaos, and he almost fell unconscious. Grand Preceptor. Grand Preceptor. Everyone was alarmed to see the Grand Preceptor's state, and several civil officials hurriedly went up to support him. Wang Chong, such impudence. How could you say such things to the Grand Preceptor? No one was happier than King Qi at this time. With a sweep of his robe and justice and righteousness on his face, he walked out from the shadow of the pillar and harshly rebuked Wang Chong. The Grand Preceptor is already very old, and has spilled blood, sweat, and tears in service of the Great Tang. Is there any official or general that would not respect him? Even when I see him, I respectfully address him as Grand Preceptor. If something happens to the Grand Preceptor, will you be able to take the responsibility? King Qi turned his head to the sage emperor. Your Majesty, this subject wishes to impeach the king of foreign lands for showing no respect to his elders. The Great Tang is ruled through benevolence and ceremony, and respect for one's elders is the foundation of the country. The king of foreign lands has spoken disrespectfully to the Grand Preceptor, so this subject proposes that his rank as king be removed to serve as an example to the rest of the country. The atmosphere in the imperial court turned strange. Everyone in the capital knew of King Qi's conduct, and not even the civil officials liked him that much. King Qi rarely stepped forward, and he would normally make trouble through the officials serving in his faction. This was probably the first time he had stepped forward to impeach another official of the court. Humph! Wang Chong only coldly sneered at this sight. Your Majesty, this subject also has a memorial. This subject wishes to impeach King Qi for failing at his duty. The imperial court is for the discussion and handling of government affairs. King Qi, as an imperial prince and king of the Great Tang, enjoys high status, yet in his 20-some years in the court, King Qi has paid no attention to outside matters. The first proposal he has made in his life is to accuse another subject of lacking respect for elders. King Qi has mediocre talents and is ignorant and incompetent. This subject believes that King Qi cannot undertake this enormous responsibility. Your Majesty, please remove King Qi's rank and have King Qi retire. You! King Qi suddenly turned his head, his face contorting in rage. King Qi had always cherished the saying, "Too many words will inevitably reveal a mistake." Thus, if he could have his subordinates do the job, he would never personally intervene. Thus, after so many years, even though he had privately engaged in so many projects, no one had ever been able to do anything to him. But when he finally had an opportunity to criticize Wang Chong had turned around and used this point to make trouble for him, catching him totally off guard. "Wang Chong, you're speaking sheer nonsense. King Qi, whether or not you have any achievements, others don't know and you yourself aren't clear about them. In the view of this king, the Bureau of Rights is more appropriate for you," Wang Chong sternly said. He couldn't retreat, nor was there a need to retreat, and he couldn't endure, nor was there a need to endure. The proposal to dissolve the prefectural armies had unleashed Wang Chong's rage. Whether it was the Grand Preceptor or King Qi, Wang Chong would not forgive anyone who tried to argue for this matter, would not let a single one of them go. This was no longer an ordinary factional battle or some argument in the imperial court. The lives of the millions of people of the Central Plains were at stake. Enough! King Qi, king of foreign lands. Stop messing around. Next to the dragon throne, Gao Lishir could watch no longer and harshly rebuked. "Both of you are kings of the Great Tang of revered status. Just what are you showing His Majesty by acting this way?" A court debate on the proposal to dissolve the prefectural armies had actually devolved into a childish quarrel. Not even Gao Lishir could let this go on any longer. Gao Lishir's rebuke immediately caused the court to become much quieter. Although Gao Lishir did not have an official post, everyone knew that he had followed the Sage Emperor for many years and had long ago developed a mental connection with him. It was clear that not even the Sage Emperor could stand to watch this quarrel go on any longer. "Withdraw!" The Sage Emperor suddenly spoke, his 5 fingers slightly shifting. His dignified voice resounded through the hall, suffused with a tone that could not be questioned. "Yes, yes, Your Majesty." Wang Chong and King Qi both bowed and retreated to the sides. Wang Chong's face was cold and emotionless, but King Qi was grinding his teeth in anger. "Bastard thing! This king will never let you go." A frighteningly cold light flickered through King Qi's eyes. He had originally believed that he could use Wang Chong's conflict with the Grand Preceptor to accuse him of disrespect, not expecting Wang Chong to easily take care of the problem with a few words. This filled King Qi with rage and made him want nothing more than to kill Wang Chong. "Let us return to the debate." Gao Lishir waved his horsetail whisk as he spoke in the name of the Sage Emperor. In addition, King of Foreign Lands, the Grand Preceptor is more than 80 years old. Young people are full of passion and vigor, but can you not yield a little to the Grand Preceptor? These words were fully intended to allay the hostilities between Wang Chong and the Grand Preceptor. "Yes, Wang Chong understands." Wang Chong bowed, understanding that the Sage Emperor was trying to shield him. At this moment, a slender figure dressed in a wide robe stepped out from the front row and said, "Your Majesty!" With regards to the matter of dissolving the prefectural armies, the rage of the King of Foreign Lands is understandable, but this lowly subject also believes that the civil officials have a reasonable argument. The Great Tang is at peace, and we have only recently signed treaties with Yusang, the Eastern and Western Turks, Mengshi Zhao, Goguryeo, and Arabia. We truly do not need so many soldiers, and the various prefectural armies consume no small amount of resources. In wartime, this cost is acceptable, but there are currently no wars, and the King of Foreign Lands has just defeated the Arabian Empire. There is truly no need to maintain this many soldiers. If it is really necessary, we can maintain a part of the prefectural armies and recruit the rest when they are needed. At the sound of this voice, both civil officials and generals lowered their heads, respectful looks on their faces. The Great Tang's sage minister Li Zhenu. No one had expected him to speak at a time like this. As the Prime Minister of the Great Tang, the leader of all the officials, Li Zhenu carried abnormal weight with his words, and he had even more influence than Wang Chong, King Song, or King Qi. Once the Prime Minister made his stance known, he would immediately influence the result of the debate. Many people would even change their stances on the spot to follow the Prime Minister. Wang Chong had just been preparing to return to his spot, But when he heard the Prime Minister speak, his eyes narrowed and his face paled. Wang Chong opened his mouth to speak, but as his gaze passed over a nearby pillar, he suddenly stopped. King Song. Wang Chong's eyebrows rose as he gazed at the familiar figure. All the way up to now, King Song had appeared muddle-headed and absent-minded, not even participating in the majority of the court debate, which was completely different from how he usually acted. But at this moment, when Prime Minister Li Zhenu began to speak, King Song appeared to have been given a sharp jab, his head suddenly rising to stare at this figure. At this moment, King Song's eyes were bursting with light, and his expression was extremely complex. This? Wang Chong raised his brow and followed King Song's gaze to that robed figure, his mind in turmoil as he vaguely guessed at something. As Wang Chong was thinking, Li Zhenu's words were causing a chain reaction through the court. This subject agrees. This subject agrees. This subject agrees. For a moment, the hall was filled with sounds of approval from the civil officials. Even a few officials who had not expressed their stance before were adding their comments to the pile. Wang Chong's eyes chilled as he immediately stepped forward. Your Majesty, this subject objects. Since this involves the prefectural armies and the Bureau of Military Personnel, the border protectorates should be asked their opinion, including all the title generals, protector generals, and great generals. Once all these generals have expressed their opinion, a decision can be made. This should not be something that only the imperial court can decide. Wang Chong spoke firmly, and he immediately garnered everyone's attention. Your Majesty, this subject agrees. At this moment, Minister of War Xianxia Jianxiong instinctively sensed that the time was now and strode forward. Even Xianxia Jianxiong couldn't help but praise Wang Chong, as dragging in the Protector Generals of the Great Tang was truly an ingenious move. Although the decisions of the Imperial Court had always been decided within the Imperial Court, no one would dare to say that dissolving the prefectural armies did not have anything to do with the Protector Generals and Great Generals on the border. Xianxia Jianxiong was almost certain that Geshu Han, Xianxia Jianxiong, and Sishun, and Gao Xianji all shared the same opinion on the matter of the prefectural armies. As long as these top-class generals of the Great Tang made their stances known, they would immediately represent an influential group that not even the civil officials could do anything about. The King of Foreign Lands together with the Minister of War immediately had all the civil officials, including the Prime Minister Li Zhenu, grimacing. But this was far from over. A moment later, another voice resounded through the hall, adding another considerable weight onto the side of the opposition. The ever-motionless King Song finally stepped forward and loudly proclaimed, Your Majesty, this subject also agrees. Whoosh! The imperial court suddenly became as silent as a grave. With three heavyweights of the court expressing their stance at the same time, all the civil officials felt an immense pressure. When King Song stepped forward, Wang Chong could clearly see Prime Minister Li Zhenu slightly paling, losing some of his former composure. Your Majesty, this subject agrees. This subject agrees. This subject agrees. The generals in the imperial court were revitalized and began to express their support for Wang Chong's proposal. The imperial court was quickly at a stalemate, and everyone looked up to await the sage emperor's judgment. The hall was quiet, and in the middle of this silence, Wang Chong clearly heard the sound of that bell that wasn't a bell, very soft as if coming from extremely far away. None of the other officials noticed this, but when Wang Chong heard the sound, his heart sank and his face grimaced. Wang Chong looked up, and though everything seemed as normal in the upper reaches of the hall, Wang Chong could clearly sense that the atmosphere had turned strange. We understand. This matter will be put off for discussion at a later time. The sage emperor's majestic voice boomed through the hall. After saying this, the sage emperor suddenly rose from his throne and left. The officials immediately lowered their heads and roared, May the emperor live 10,000 years. They watched as the sage emperor left. Wang Chong's first court session came to an end, and with the light crack of a whip, all the officials departed from Taihe Palace. Once the court session was over, Xianxia Jianxiong came forward and accompanied Wang Chong out of the hall. Meanwhile, almost all the generals thronged around Wang Chong, all their faces ruddy with excitement. Your Highness, we owe much to you. Otherwise, We generals wouldn't even have a place to stand in the future. Right. Your Highness has truly increased the prestige of the people on our side. Although the conflict between civil and military has always existed, they're resorting to any method possible now. They're truly acting out of line. That's right. Fortunately, His Highness was here. Although the Grand Preceptor has always been dissatisfied with us, he rarely participated in court debates, but recently, the Grand Preceptor has been present in almost every debate. We don't have the status to oppose the Grand Preceptor. Only His Highness is capable of doing so. The Grand Preceptor, King Qi, the Prime Minister, and all the civil officials, the generals of the court had to spend almost every day under this kind of pressure. Wang Chong's arrival finally allowed these people to hold their heads high, and when they saw the Grand Preceptor pale with rage and unable to stand steady, all of them breathed a sigh of relief. Although it was truly somewhat inappropriate for Wang Chong to enrage the Grand Preceptor into such a state, there was one thing that Wang Chong was right about. The Grand Preceptor truly had recently been bullying around others with his seniority. But these words could only be said in one's mind and not spoken out loud. My lords, you are all too polite. Matters of state are not a child's game. Without the assistance of my lords, Wang Chong would find it difficult to achieve anything. Wang Chong calmly said, and the group walked out while exchanging pleasantries. Wang Chong had now confirmed his status as one of the leaders in the military faction. As they exited Taihe Palace and descended the steps, they spotted a figure standing ahead, his silver imperial robe flapping in the wind, endowing him with a transcendent air. Wang Chong and Zhangqiu Jianxiong glanced at each other before quickly walking up to the figure. Your Highness! Wang Chong and Zhangqiu Jianxiong stepped forward and bowed. Wang Chong, come and walk with me, King Song said with his hands held behind his back. Then this Zhangqiu Jianxiong will bid farewell. Zhangqiu Jianxiong understood that the two had matters to discuss, so he immediately withdrew. The other generals also understood the situation and dispersed, leaving Wang Chong and King Song to walk alone. King Song stood next to Wang Chong as they walked and indifferently asked, during this court session, did you feel it? Wang Chong nodded. Although this was only his first day, Wang Chong could already sense the undercurrent in the court, the strange and extremely complicated clouds that were shrouding it. The circumstances of that day were even more complicated than they were today. King Song lightly said. These words could be considered his explanation to Wang Chong. Just who are those officials with the unfamiliar faces? So many people can't have just appeared in the court overnight. Just who are they? Wang Chong asked. For a little while, I also cannot answer this question, but in terms of background, these people are perfect. Not even I can make any sort of criticism, King Song said. So, it's the Grand Preceptor, right? Wang Chong suddenly stopped, his eyes turning sharp. The Grand Preceptor was the leader of the civil officials, and almost all the new faces in the court were civil officials. For so many new civil officials to appear in court could not be done without the Grand Preceptor's approval. Moreover, even if the Grand Preceptor was not the mastermind, he was definitely inextricably connected. Before, I had the same idea as you, but I'm afraid that this matter is not so simple. The Grand Preceptor truly is involved, but he is not the man controlling things from behind the curtain. In comparison, I'm more worried about another matter, King Song gravely said. Oh! Wang Chong's brow creased, but just when he was about to speak, a mellow voice came from behind him. Your Highnesses, please hold. Both of them immediately turned around to see a slender figure wearing the crimson robe of a rank 1 official walking up from behind them. The pair's expressions immediately turned strange. Lord Prime Minister. King Song gave a bow, but Wang Chong remained upright, with his hands held behind his back and a gentle smile on his lips. The person chasing after them was none other than the leader of all the officials, the current Prime Minister, Li Zhenu. Your Highnesses are too polite. As Li Zhenu approached, he hurriedly returned the bow. Does Lord Prime Minister have business with us? Wang Chong asked, neither too coldly nor too warmly. He had just quarreled with Li Zhenu in the imperial court, so he was in no mood to meet with him now. Ha ha! King of foreign lands, King Song. Do your highnesses perhaps have some misunderstanding about me from the matter just now? Li Jianu clasped his hands and gave a refreshing smile. This one was only discussing the matter of dissolving the prefectural armies on its own merits and did not have any other intentions. In the future, if it is necessary, it is entirely possible to begin recruiting soldiers in advance, perhaps even increasing the scale of the prefectural armies. All of this is possible. Li Jianu spoke with flawless poise, and his expression was frank and confident, warm and genial like a ball of cotton. It was impossible to get angry at a person like this. Moreover, despite being an upper rank 1 official and leader of all officials, Li Jianu did not put on any airs. This was extremely rare amongst the officials and was one of the reasons this Prime Minister of the Great Tang was so respected. Lord Prime Minister's words are too serious. This king did not have that intention. A hint of confusion appeared in King Song's eyes, but some of the doubt in his mind appeared to have instantly been cleared up. But Wang Chong's expression remained cold and unmoved. If he did not know of the truth behind this sage minister of the Great Tang, Wang Chong might have been exactly like King Song or the other officials of the court and been fooled by this man's reputation and smile. But Wang Chong was well aware that if he were deceived by this genial attitude, he would be so thoroughly devoured that not even bones would be left. People had been fooled by his smiling appearance in the past and the present, and they would still be fooled in the future, but this group would never count Wang Chong as one of its members. This was because Wang Chong was well aware of this sage minister's other and more illustrious name, Li Linfu, and there was another saying about this prime minister, honey in mouth, sword in belly. This person was probably one of the finest actors in the history of the Great Tang, perhaps the history of the entire Central Plains. Wang Chong didn't believe a word that he said. This talk of expanding the prefectural armies when the time was right was merely talk and would never come to fruition. Wang Chong suddenly stepped forward, smiling, and commented to Li Jianu, "Heh, Lord Prime Minister, the governor of Yichuan has asked me to wish you well." But these simple words caused the prestigious Prime Minister to instantly pale. Even someone of Li Jianu's personality couldn't help but turn ashen and speechless for a moment. But it was only for a moment. Li Jianu quickly regained his composure, his face ruddy and fresh as the spring wind, beaming with smiles. "Ha! It seems like the king of foreign lands has a very deep misunderstanding of me." Li Jianu was not angry, and his face remained relaxed and carefree. "King Song, king of foreign lands, this minister still has other matters to attend to and will leave first. In the future, I will pay a visit and give an explanation to your highnesses," Li Jianu said. "Lord Prime Minister is too polite. Then let us meet again some other day." King Song clasped his hands and bowed. He watched Li Jianu leave, and only when he was out of sight did he finally turn to Wang Chong. "Wang Chong, why did you suddenly bring up the matter of Li Shizhi? Are you telling me you believe it to be true?" "Not believe. It was always true," Wang Chong nonchalantly said, looking in the direction in which Li Linfu had vanished. The governor of Yichuan, Li Shizhi, had once enjoyed the great favor of the sage emperor, but Li Linfu's schemes forced him into retirement. Just when he had managed to return to the capital and get close to the sage emperor, the moment he turned around, Li Linfu deceived the sage emperor by saying that Li Shizhi was old and ill. He requested that the sage emperor show pity by having him resign his post and live out the rest of his life in peace. When Li Shizhi discovered that he had been deceived, he disclosed the matter. But none of the court officials, not even Li Linfu's political enemies, believed him. This was because Li Linfu had the reputation of a sage minister, and it was deemed impossible for him to do such a thing. In the end, Li Shizhi became depressed and eventually died. This matter had caused a large turmoil in society at the time, but since there had been no firm evidence and no one believed the accuser, it was eventually set aside. Not even King Song had expected Wang Chong to revive this matter, but when he saw the serious expression on Wang Chong's face, King Song turned pensive. "So, Your Highness has been avoiding any meetings because of Prime Minister Li Jianu, correct?" Wang Chong suddenly said. "Buzz." King Song instantly grimaced. "This isn't the right place to talk. Let's go." King Song suddenly grabbed Wang Chong's arms, scanned the area, and then immediately began to pull Wang Chong forward. Outside the imperial court, King Song pulled Wang Chong onto his carriage, and only once they were seated did he breathe a sigh of relief. Wang Chong, you are extremely intelligent. Even if I didn't tell you of this matter, you would have found a way to dig it up. But there are many talkative mouths in the imperial court, a place where one is apt to get into trouble, not a place where we can talk. The army has already been withdrawn from Karasan and the protectorate armies have all had their troop strength reduced, and now we're even talking about dissolving the prefectural armies. Is there anything else that could be more important? Wang Chong said in a self-mocking tone. King Song was silent. So, Your Highness, just what happened on that day? Wang Chong got straight to the point. At this point, there's no reason to keep hiding things from you. King Song sighed and began to slowly describe the events of that day. Wang Chong had already learned of many events of that day from Wang Zhen, Xianxia Jianxiong, and other important officials, but King Song could fill the most important blank on his map. King Song had known about the proposal regarding Karasan long before the court session had begun. King Song was one of the important leaders of the court, so it was impossible to hide most proposals from him. Many proposals would even pass through King Song's hands first before being sent on to the imperial court. At the start, King Song had not been very concerned about the proposal to withdraw soldiers from Karasan, because there was simply no way it could pass. He regarded it as the product of some impulsive civil minister. But when he arrived at court, King Song immediately sensed that something was wrong. Firstly, Wang Zhen was not present, and secondly, Minister of War Xianxia Jianxiong did not arrive until very late in the morning. What made King Song the most uneasy was that this anti-war proposal had obtained the support of many civil officials in the court. It did not seem at all like the work of some impulsive civil official. Even worse was that King Song had realized that those civil officials had come fully prepared. The Grand Preceptor was leading them, and they had formed an alliance with King Qi. In the court, King Qi had all the officials under him throw their full support to the proposal. But it was another person who had truly allowed the proposal to pass. Li Linfu. Wang Chong had guessed the answer before King Song could even say it. Correct. It was the Lord Prime Minister. King Song sighed. Wang Chong, you've never been involved with the politics of the imperial court, and this was only your first court session, so you don't know that the Prime Minister doesn't just represent some important position. His post contains another meaning amongst the officials. The Lord Prime Minister rarely interferes in the affairs of the court, but when he does intervene, it is not just his will, but the will of His Majesty. Lord Li is skilled in grasping the mind of the sage emperor. In the last 10-some years, he has spoken very rarely, but when he does speak, his opinion happens to coincide with that of the sage emperor. Thus, any proposal with the Prime Minister's approval will in the end be passed by His Majesty. There are even times when it is inconvenient for His Majesty to personally express his will, so he will express his will through the Lord Prime Minister. For many years, everyone has silently agreed that Lord Li's will is actually the will of the sage emperor. During that court session, when the Lord Prime Minister stepped forward, I originally believed that he would represent the sage emperor's will and oppose the proposal. To my surprise, he stood on the side that was for the proposal. This expression of approval caused a massive reversal in the court, and there were even many generals who were forced to give up on their standpoint and turn to the other side. King Song sternly said, a look of recollection in his eyes. Even now, when he thought back to the strange mood of that day, he was filled with shock. In the space of a single day, the imperial court had decided the fate of that frontline fortress on the border of the Great Tang that had been paid for with countless lives.